Hi everyone, in this video I'm going to talk to you about how to study for mathematics. My focus in this video is going to be on students in their last year of schooling, just prior to their major exams. So what I'm going to talk about is, what is your goal? What is it you're actually trying to achieve from these exams? What's in the syllabus? Do you know it? What are your strengths and weaknesses? How do you summarise? How do you use your teacher or tutor to your advantage? And how we practice past papers. So your goal is the most important thing, that's why I've put it first. So if you're going for the highest band, in a lot of cases, the paper is split into roughly 80-20. So 80% is your routine type questions. Some of it can be quite difficult and difficult topics, but they are straightforward. And then there's roughly 20% where they're unseen type questions. You're being asked to apply your knowledge to stuff you haven't seen before. If you're going for the highest band, practice that 80%. You need to be efficient and accurate. So you need to be able to work through it quickly and not make mistakes. And then you need to spend a significant period of your time also practicing your problem solving skills and those harder type questions. If you're going for the middle band, focus on the 80%. So make sure it's efficient and accurate, because that'll give you your middle band, won't it, if you get most of that all right. And then for the other 20%, you go into what's called damage control. You try and milk as many marks from it as you possibly can. I'll show you what I mean by that later on. If you're just trying to pass, then you practice what you can do and you ignore what you can't do. So you might have one topic. In the IB, it might be vectors, for instance. You might think, you know what, I could do this for 100 years and I still wouldn't get it. Then write it off. You might have some part of the topic that you can do, but don't spend hours and hours on something that's only going to be a tiny part of the exam. Practice what you can do so that you get those marks. Do you have a copy of the syllabus? If you don't, get one. Have you learnt everything? Your teacher has to have taught you everything. He or she has to go and tick that off. But were you present? Did you have absences? So on Excel, copy the main points of the syllabus and then analyse your strengths and weaknesses. So here's an example. This is the IB Maths Standard syllabus. You can see how I've listed the different dot points from the syllabus. And I've also put in the chapter in the textbook. And we're going to use a 4-point system. So here's the 4 points. Number 1 is, I know what this is. I was there in the class when the teacher taught it. Number 2 is, I can do the routine questions, the straightforward questions. So here's Snoopy, and he's looking at this question and going, you beauty, I can do this, I know it. 3 is, I can do the harder hidden or head type questions. So there's 3 types of questions. There's the here questions, H-E-R-E. There's the hidden questions. That's where you've got to sift through the information and try and figure out what you've got to do. And then these ones here, the head type questions. They're the hardest. They're the problem solving questions, often referred to as the unseen questions. So you've got to apply your knowledge to an unseen situation. And then finally, 4 is, you could teach somebody else. So once you know your strengths and weaknesses, then you set up a study timetable. And it's tempting just to do past papers and do past paper after past paper after past paper. And sure, do some of that, but divide your time between writing summaries, relearning concepts, doing revision questions, and practicing past papers. Here's another thing. Don't study for more than 2 hours at a time. You start to get to the point of diminishing returns. You start to forget things rather than learn them. So let's have a look at how we might write a summary. There are different versions. So some people like pictorial summaries, like mind maps. They're my favorite. Some people like just to write dot points down a page. That's okay too. Here's another version you might not have heard of. That's where you grab the formula booklet and you fill in examples in and around the formulas. And that's similar to a cheat sheet that you might have used in junior school when you were allowed a piece of paper that you could fill both sides with anything that you wanted to take into a test. So you'd start with the formulas and then you'd put examples around those formulas. So here's how I like to do it. This is only a suggestion. I get a 48-page exercise book, so that's one of those little ones, and I do a double page for each topic. And so this is the topic non-right angled trigonometry, and I try and summarize each topic into one page with examples and important bits that I need to remember. Then there's the exam itself. You need to know the layout. Now your teacher ought to have set internal exams in the same format as the final exam, particularly in your final year at school. So you should know the answer to these questions. Are there different sections or different papers? How many questions are there? What types of questions are there? Multiple choice, short answer, long answer. How do I answer the different questions? By that I mean, do I have to show working out? You should know the formula booklet. You need to know that inside out. You need to know what formulas are there, and more importantly, what formulas are not there. What topics are always asked? This is a really valuable activity to go through the past couple of papers and see what the common themes are. That gives you a starting point for your revision. Which brings us to working out. Always show working out for questions worth 2 or more marks. They might not be marks that are allocated for working out, but you don't know. So let's not take a chance on it. If it's 2 or more marks, assume one of them is going to be for process. If you get your answer from a graphics display calculator, justify your answer either by showing calculations or graphs. Now it's tempting just to get tutoring prior to a major exam, but it can be counterproductive, and the reason is you're not doing the thinking, the tutor is. So quite often you guys will rock up to your tutor and they'll say, "What don't you know?" and you'll say, "Everything." And so the tutor proceeds to teach you everything, and you'll be sitting there thinking, "I already know that." So you're actually wasting time and money. The best way to learn is to think about your learning and then act upon it. Now, if you find that you've got holes in your knowledge, you were away for a topic, get some help, some specific help. Ring the tutor or the teacher and say, "I don't get vectors, I don't get standard deviation, teach me that." So you can get help through your teacher, a tutor, or YouTube videos. And your peers are a great resource. So they know things that you don't know, and you know things that they don't know. So get together, have a regular time where you sit down and you study together. You can bring along questions to go through together. You can test one another. Try and find people who have a similar goal to you. There's no point having a person who's going for a higher band studying with a person who's just trying to pass. Okay, the person with the higher band is going to spend all their time teaching the person who's just trying to pass, so they're not equally yoked, if you like. Now, when it comes time to practice your past papers, there's several ways you can do that. So firstly, you can pick a section. So like in the IB, there's a non-calculator paper. You might want to just practice non-calculator papers. Or you could practice content type questions. That's where you pick a topic. You might want to do all the vector questions for the last 10 years. Or you can target question types. You could practice the straightforward questions and time yourself for efficiency and accuracy, or you can tackle the harder hidden type questions. Then there's also timed practice. You can do that with help, so using your summaries, or under exam conditions. Quite often your teacher is happy to mark any papers that you've done under exam conditions, so you get an idea of how you're going. And then finally, in the exam itself, be calm, stay calm. Don't allow nerves to undo all the good work that you've done. Choose your approach. Some people like to work sequentially from the beginning to the end so they don't miss anything. Some people like to do their favourite topics first. Some people like to go and do the stuff that they think that they'll forget. Whichever way you do it, just make sure you answer every question. Don't get stuck on a particular question. So I know if you're a sequential worker, you don't want to move on to question 8 until you've finished question 7. Give that up. Okay? Try and get as many marks and then come back to question 7 if you're stuck. Tackle the harder 20%. I'm going to look at that on the next slide. And go into damage control or try and milk some marks there. And then finally, check your work. You can't see your own mistakes. So don't sit there at the end of the paper with your head on the desk. Go through it again. Do a question again. You've got working out paper and see whether you've made a mistake. Check your answers to see if they're reasonable. I mentioned damage control for the harder head type questions. How do we get maximum marks for these sorts of questions? Firstly, they're often scaffolded. See how they've stepped you through this? You find the bits that you can do. So we might be able to do A, but we only might get part there for B. Don't give up here because you might be able to do part C. They quite often have these show that statements, and it's for that very reason, so that if you can't do B, you can still do C. There's also this thing called follow through marks. So suppose you mucked up part A, but you worked it through correctly for your answer, you can get all 4 marks for part B. Here's another example. So in this case, we've got multiple topics. We've got logs and sequences. Again, we've got a couple of show that statements. And here's the last thing that I want to mention to you. For this question here, you have to find R, and then you have to show that the sum of the infinite sequence is blah, blah, blah. If you can't find R, you can't do either of those questions. So you should have a go at this question and get a value for R, even if it's wrong. And then work it through and find an answer to B. Don't be tempted in that case to make it equal to 4 log base 2 of x, because that would be wrong. They'd take a mark off for that. If you know your R is not right, work it through and just leave it as whatever you find it to be. If it's worth doing, it's worth doing well. It's an old saying, but it's a good saying. You've just spent 2 years of your life doing this course. Finish it off well. Put the time in, work hard, and prepare thoroughly for the exam. And then finally, it's good luck from Snoopy and Woodstock and me.